Hello, writer, and welcome back to my life. It's Writer Wednesday, where I give you my tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how to do what I do as an indie author. So every week on this show, we discuss a writing topic proposed by one of my patrons on Patreon, and this week's question comes to us from Kristen Stevens, who asks, 3-act structure versus 4-act structure versus 7-act structure. What? Why? Why are there so many? How do you pick one that works for you? Her question was slightly more eloquent, but I think mine was funnier, so we'll go with that. So in my experience, all the different act structures and the different ways of thinking about story are kind of different views of the same thing, which makes it intensely frustrating when I see people arguing about this, and they're saying, oh, well, no, this one is right, and this one is what this person used, and this one is what this person used, and heh. The important thing to realize about any act structure is that they are ways of analyzing a story. They are not some concrete, irrefutable, ironclad thing that has been around forever and everybody has used if they wanted to be successful. How best to put this? It's like physics. The laws of physics that we have studied don't exist in the real universe. Bear with me. They are ways that we have codified what happens in the universe, okay? Like just numbers themselves are arbitrary things that we have made up in order to understand what's going on. And even the oldest and the most popular of the act structures, 3-act structures, this was an idea that was thought up very recently from analyzing dramatic storytelling, okay? It wasn't something that people have known as long as they've been telling stories, unless they sort of knew it innately and, oh, when I do this, that makes for a better story, right? So all of these methods are just a way by which people analyze good storytelling and say, oh, it's easier to tell a good story if you structure it like this, or if you structure it like this, 3 acts, 4 acts, 7 acts, whatever. And consequently, if you look at the different write-ups and explanations of act structure, they kind of really seem to have a lot of similarities. Like 4-act structure in all of the write-ups that I've seen is just 3-act structure, except the second act in the middle is divided in half. And if you've read, for example, Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, you know that there is a midpoint in the middle of the second act, right? So that midpoint in 4-act structure becomes an actual division between 2 acts. So that's not different. That's not right or wrong, it's just an alternate way of looking at the same thing. 7-act structure, as far as I can tell, is really a TV thing? Like, I've never seen anybody actually use 7-act structure outside of television scenarios where it plays very well with commercials. Like, if you look at a story that's told on TV via like a movie or a very long episode, there's still 3-act structure within it, and then it's just divvied up into 7 parts because commercials. So when deciding what act structure to use for yourself when you're planning your own work, there's 2 things that you can do. Number 1, I'm a big believer in borrowing from the masters who have come before us. So if you're writing epic fantasy like me, look at your favorite authors, read interviews with them, or watch interviews with them if they're more modern and they have YouTube videos out. Read their memoirs, read any of their letters that are available. What advice on writing do they give to other people? And in there, you might find what act structure they use. Find out everything you can about how the great people that you admire do it, and then just start off with that same basic premise. And the second option, which you can actually do in conjunction with the first, is study great storytelling advice and cherry pick what works for you. So I've read a lot of books on writing, as you can imagine. Some of them were really good. Some of them were not so good. Some of them were interesting, but I don't feel like I really learned anything from it. Like, it was a good read, but I wasn't like, oh my god, this solves a huge problem that I've had with my writing. And frankly, On Writing by Stephen King was one of those. It's a great book! It's so interesting! And I love learning about it. I love learning about him and like how he came to do all this stuff, but I didn't go away from that with some big thing of like, oh my god, I can write so much better now. I guess I felt good about just the process of writing in general. Like, I was more okay with continuing to do it and feeling good about myself, which is a valuable service. On Writing's a great book. I don't want anybody to go in the comments saying, oh my god, Garrett hates On Writing. And the book that catapulted my storytelling competence forward the most was Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. That's a screenwriting book. I was a budding screenwriter / filmmaker back then, and yeah, it helped me a lot. And Save the Cat uses 3-act structure. And therefore I use 3-act structure. And listen, here's the deal. Your book will either be good or it won't, regardless of the act structure that you use. Story structure is not immutable. Act structure is not immutable. Not everyone who's ever written a good book used 4-act structure. Not everyone who ever wrote a bad book used 7-act structure. It's a tool. It's a really good tool, but it's a tool. And if you think of story as construction, then, sometimes you want to attach things together using a screw, and sometimes you want to attach them together using a nail, and sometimes you want to use a staple. What tool gets the job done? I've rarely given advice more suspect than that, considering how little experience I have with construction, but you get the idea. The important thing is to find an act structure that gets you to the end of a story that you can be proud of. Thank you so much to Kristen for this excellent question. I hope that you found the answer helpful. A reminder that my $5 patrons on Patreon are the only ones who get to request topics for this video series, and they get all of these videos 2 weeks early, so if that sounds good to you, go check out my Patreon right down there. If you don't want to be a patron, consider buying a Have I Mentioned I Write book shirt. They're pretty cool, and half of all profits go to the artist who designed them because she's amazing. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!